we were talking about this is video lecture 2, so if you haven't watched one, go back to. We're talking about Augustus Suprema Porta, and in this we see a different approach to history in the art of Romans versus the Greeks. The Romans copied the Greeks and imported their works. They liked to actually collect Greek art, and they took a lot of their ideas from them. But in Roman work, we see more of a narrative in their art, and it's commemorative versus a Greek idealized mythos or myth about who is the ideal figure. This is more on history, less on myth. And we see this on the architectural friezes later on, and in some way we'll see in other sculptures how they preserve people's likenesses. We're talking about how this is incorporating both somewhat together because of the dolphin of Venus and Cupid, son of Venus and the war god. Mars is Cupid, so we're having Venus and Cupid connected to his lineage. So there's a bit of myth bringing in here, but it's much more about history, an actual person from history. What's missing here is the baton of power, sort of like a sword, but changed a bit to become more symbolic. And he's wearing a soldier's uniform, a breastplate, and he's addressing soldiers. This gesture is one of oration. He's addressing the people. Now, on the breastplate is carved in relief some imagery that we're going to look at here. And he's addressing him as if he is in power and authority as a commanding emperor or general who's won a victory. This very much functions as political propaganda. We see that oration gesture. Or political propaganda about the greatness of the Roman Empire and the greatness of the emperor. His calm restraint on his face, he's idealized. And also we know it's propaganda that he's saying he is of the gods and his power comes from the gods. He has a strut of a dolphin for Venus and Cupid, Venus and Mars' son, on his leg. So he's very much has his own personal propaganda going on here as well. We can compare this, if we look at it, to a societal ideal with Polyclitus' spear bear and propaganda and power of a historical figure in the Roman one. They have similar materials. It's a Greek original, not a Roman copy. The Greek original, not this Roman copy, would have been bronze, but still, nonetheless, we get the idea that they're very similar. The strut is hidden here on Augustus with symbols of his connection to divinity, but it allows us to see how the Romans really did copy the style of the Greek piece here, the pieces, and you can see even the hairstyle, the calm restraint, some of the feeling of a realistic musculature. So I skipped forward here on accident a little bit. You have the feeling of calm restraint, the realistic musculature. They're both anatomically accurate. Obviously, he's nude, he's not. That has to do with some of the idealization going on here. This is more of a portrait that's idealized, like a feeling of a particular person. This is more of a total idealized person, like not a portrait. This would have been originally painted. Spearbearer was a white marble. This is a Roman copy of the original bronze. Both warriors, okay? So the baton of power is missing, the spear is missing, but they're both warriors. He is in an oratory position, like he's conquering general commander. He's supposed to be holding the spear. There's an armor here. They're both in a contrapposto. You can see the leg is straight and the leg is straight and the knee is bent. The struts are there because they're both marble. They have similar hair, as I said before, and they're both barefoot in this idealized way. So there's very much a lot of the similarity going on here, and symbolisms of power with a spear and a baton. So we can see that they're definitely taking a lot of their ideas in the art from Greek sculpture, but adapting them for their own concerns. So they're taking what they like and then making it their own too, which we'll see time and again in a lot of art. We saw the Greeks doing that in a certain way with the Egyptians and their archaic Greek sculpture, and now we're seeing it with the Romans taking from the Greeks in that way. Now, moving on to this detail of the breastplate. So this is on the breastplate there. So we're looking at this close up. It depicts our barbarian man in traditional Parthian dress. Some people have identified him as, he's here, as King Phraates IV from the Parthians. He is giving a military standard, this is the military standard, with an eagle on top of it, to a man with a wolf. Right here is the wolf. This is the man with the wolf here. Okay, the person is in military garb accepting the standard. So we can kind of see that he's got armor on. He's actually wearing something very similar to this sculpture of Augustus. He's accepting that standard with the eagle on top of it. And this has been interpreted, this person has been interpreted to be a couple different people, or maybe in a way representing, you could say, this is my theory, a couple of them at the same time. So, of course, he could be Augustus himself. We have some of the idea that he looks somewhat similarly clothed. He's on, he's historically connected to this event. Or it could be Romulus, the founder of Rome. He's got the wolf with him. Either way, we could say the wolf is a symbol of Rome, right? Or it could be Mars, the king, the war god, who we know he's associated with because he's got the Cupid and the Venus on his leg. Or he could be a personification, so a particular human, a image of the Roman army in general. And in some way we could say, if it is Augustus, then he's got the mythology of Romulus being attached to him with the wolf, and he is the head of the army, so in some way he personifies it. So it's kind of in a certain way all of it at the same time. In general, it's believed that this piece, we can see the detail here. This is an angle to show you that it's a relief carving on the top of the guy. The piece is commemorating Augustus's diplomatic victory over Parthia. So that was a big deal between the wars and things. Surrounding this central image, so this is the main point in the center of the whole of the breastplate, is divinities. We have like Neptune, Artemis with the stag, different divinities, and personifications that are decorated around it in detail to kind of show a cosmic setting populated by various gods. So we have all of this happening around. They're in some way, we could say, bearing witness to it, or this is a part of their intention, and we could say maybe this is another type of or part of the political propaganda to be saying that he is saying he is of the gods, like a god. Remember, we have Venus and Cupid on his leg, and he's showing himself or a personification of his victory in some way, being witnessed or with the gods around it. Well, being around it is talking about the idea of agreeing to it or helping with it, right? So there's very strong overtones of the fact that we're talking about a guy who's orating in victory with this narrative on his thing, saying he's of a god and using idealized Greek sculptural tropes, but changing them for his own purposes, right? So there's very, 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 very much a strong political propaganda here. All right, going on to another piece. This is Marcus Aurelius. He was also an emperor. It's an equestrian portrait. This word equestrian means horses. He's on a horse. It's his portrait on a horse. It was in the piazza designed by Michelangelo on Capitoline Hill, dedicated to the god Saturn, but it's been moved inside because it was being destroyed by pigeon poop. Marcus Aurelius was one of what they call, in quotes, the good emperors of Rome. He reigned from 161 to 180 AD. He was a military leader. He led armies against the Germanic tribes of the north, but he was also very famous as a philosopher. This is an actual book that you could still check out or buy today called Meditations, and he wrote it. He liked Greek philosophy, so he actually kept himself in the manner of a Greek philosopher. If you remember from our last sculpture we looked at, he was clean shaven. Well, Marcus Aurelius has the beard of a Greek philosopher, so he's purposely representing himself that way. This is also propaganda art. It's bronze. It's outside originally. It's celebrating imperialism. It's hollow cast bronze. So this is one of the. This is the. What isn't the first ever made equestrian statue, but it's the one that we'll see people model. There's a bunch of these we'll see as a trope where some kind of person in power is on their horse, called an equestrian statue. That this is the one that they usually are following after. It's anatomically accurate, and it's fairly realistic portrait of a face. An actual personage comes out of this, so that's something. It gets into what we're talking about when we're looking at the idea of history and using this mode of sculpture to be more historical. It would be originally gilded with gold leafing. This hand motion he has here, extended out, is a motion of mercy, possibly we would say for enemies below to not be killed. So we have something about this idea of him being a good emperor. He's still in power. He's still very much in charge. He's on a giant horse. He's looking very powerful. The horse is rearing, has power in his face, the feeling of control over the animal, but he's also showing himself to be the good emperor in this way as well. It's inside now because it was being destroyed by pigeon poop. And you can see how it's been being destroyed. The gold leafing is still a little bit there, but this is aesthetic pigeon poop that's been destroying it. About 10 years ago, it was taken in from the square because it was being ruined. So that just shows you some more details. There's idealization going on here still, of course, but it's much, much more in the realm of history and portraiture than anything we've seen by the Greeks. Okay. For our next sculpture, we're going to see, this is a piece of it, and we got a couple minutes here before I have to go to the next video section because I'm doing it in 15-minute sections. Constantine was from 300 AD. He was an emperor during the last phase of the empire. He was a low-born emperor. He became emperor through battle success, not from being born into it. He was famous for something called the Edict of Milan, which is the legalization and adoption of Christianity in 312 AD. You want to know that date? It's one of the only dates in the book that I have you guys actually need to know. He's also famous for moving the capital to Constantinople from Rome, and we'll talk more about that as I go on, but also in chapter 10. This is very much a political propaganda, a portrait of power. This is an 8-foot tall head. This piece right here is actually 8 feet tall. And it was from a 40-foot tall statue. And remember we talked about, this shows you the scale, we talked about how scale showing importance is an idea that when people increase scale of something, hierarchical scale we've talked about, and when there's compared to each other, but this is an example of that on the extreme. Scale, 40-foot tall statue being about importance for him as a personage and his power position. So I'll see you in video number 3.